Okay, so like I said, just a quick recap, we're going to be talking about some of the resurrection appearances of the Lord Jesus Christ in today's Bible study because Father Sam is out. This is for the people in the recording, which I forgot to start until just now. So we'll be talking about one particular event where Jesus appeared to two disciples on the road to Emmaus, and we'll see what that's all about in a minute. But as we were just saying, Jesus Christ was crucified, killed in the year 33 AD. For what, by the way, what on what charge was he killed? Blasphemy. Yeah, because he made himself equal to God. Well, actually, the first charge was that he said the first charge that stuck, let's say, was two men accused him of saying he'll destroy the temple and in the third day raise it up. But after that, they questioned him directly, "Are you the Son of God?" And he said, "I am." And you'll see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of glory with power. I'm butchering the quote, don't quote me on that. But then the high priest tore his robe and said, "Okay, well, what more proof of blasphemy do I need?" He blasphemed. Of course, there's a tremendous irony in this because he was just saying the truth. He was just telling things like they were. But to come from a mere man, that was the announcement. But it's also a weird sort of jurisdictional thing because it was the chief priests and the Pharisees of the Jewish people that put Jesus to death. But it was actually who sentenced him, let's say. It was actually the Romans who carried out the sentence, even though Pontius Pilate actually washed his hands of the situation and said, "I find no crime in him." So it was, in that sense, it's kind of strange. Well, who really did the killing? And it was kind of everyone together, but no individual, had the whole blame. So Jesus Christ was crucified and died in the year 33 AD. He was buried in a tomb by Joseph of Arimathea, and he rose on the third day. So Friday, Saturday, he rose on Sunday. After he rose on that day, he appeared to his disciples in a number of occasions over a period of 40 days. And like I was saying before, these were not like, "Oh yeah, I see Jesus like really off in the distance" or something like that. No, he came to them, even though they had all seen him die publicly and be buried. He came to them, he ate with them, he drank with them, he spoke with them at length and spent considerable amounts of time with them. And that was what proved to the disciples that he really was the Son of God. Before that, they had scattered to the four winds, basically. They remember during the crucifixion, only John stayed by him. Peter had denied him 3 times, and the rest, and obviously Judas had betrayed him, and then the rest of them just fled. They just ran. They did not stick with him. So it was really the fact that something called Christianity exists at all is in and of itself proof of the resurrection of Jesus, because they had to be convinced by something to go back and sort of rejoin or the movement which they themselves had all abandoned. We can get, the argument for the resurrection, I think is very strong, but we're not really going to go into that. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about certain resurrection appearances of Jesus that I think teach us a lot, but we don't hear them as often as I'd like in the Orthodox Church, at least if you don't come to Orthros on Sundays. So we're going to be talking about for me, one of the most meaningful and powerful resurrection appearances, which is Jesus' appearance to the 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus. But before that, let me just give you my little brief on just like the Gospels, because again, I tell everyone, if you're an Orthodox Christian, if you want to have a relationship with God, read the Gospels more than anything. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, until you're sick, until you can't take it anymore, and then read them again, because that's what it takes. These are incredibly important documents. Remember, the 4 Gospels record the biography of Jesus. They're the books of the Bible that record, from his birth, actually his pre-existence, through his death, resurrection, and ascension. And they contain deep truths about the world. And I've given this spiel a million times, and I know I'm beating a dead horse, but I'm going to continue to beat this dead horse until it turns to glue, because I think it's really important. The Gospels are not just records of things that happened in the past. The Gospels are relating eternal truths about God and his relationship with man. So whenever you see Jesus interacting with someone in the Gospels, understand that individual interaction, whether it's Jesus with the Pharisees, whether it's Jesus with Peter, whether it's Jesus with a Canaanite woman, these are metaphors for more generally how God interacts with human beings. So, always put yourself in the place of people who Jesus talks to. You know, how does Jesus talk to me when I'm acting like a Pharisee? How does Jesus interact with me when I'm like Peter, and when I confess him or when I deny him, and so on and so forth? Understand that these are not just historical events that are only relevant back then, but these are deep truths about God and the world, and so much is disclosed to them. And so hopefully by going through this resurrection appearance of Jesus on the road to Emmaus, you'll learn a little more something just about the relationship of God's man and the things he wanted to disclose through everything he did. Are there any questions so far? Okay, let's turn to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24. And we're, what? I'm sorry. Gospel of Luke, verse chapter 24. Gospel of Luke. Debbie Davidson raised a hand.
Yes, I did.
How can I help you, Debbie?
That was just before you gave the page. I was wondering if you were going to give one out. So, okay.
14, yeah, 15. Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, 14, 15. 14, 15. If you're using this Orthodox Study Bible. If you're not using this specific Orthodox Study Bible, I can't help you. But 14, 15. Chapter 24, verse 13. So just to recap, Jesus Christ died, was abandoned by his disciples, and now he has risen from the dead, but he has not been, at least according to this Gospel of St. Luke, he has not been seen by anybody yet. So the women disciples and Peter and John went to the tomb. They found it empty, and the women disciples even interacted with an angel who said he's not here and he is risen. But the rest of the disciples have not seen it yet. This is still on Sunday, I believe. Now behold, two of them were traveling that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was 7 miles from Jerusalem. So this is an interesting thing. Actually, the Greek says they were 60 stades from Jerusalem, but that is according to the miles back then, and I suppose they're pretty interchangeable with the miles we use now. It was 7 miles and a certain number of paces. And the Venerable Bede, one of the church fathers from England, actually has an interesting commentary on this, because they're walking 7 miles from Jerusalem, and it's on the 8th mile that they end up encountering Christ. He sees an analog to this, to the 7 days of creation and the days of Jesus's resurrection. So remember, God created on over the course of 6 days. He rested on the 7th day. And actually, in historical Christianity and Orthodoxy, we've always said that the 8th day is going to be eternity. The 8th day is going to be paradise. So they walked 7 miles and they encountered Jesus on the 8th, just like we're going to encounter Jesus in the 8th day of existence. But also Jesus Christ, remember, Saturday is the last day of the week, according to the Jewish keeping of time. So Jesus Christ rose on the 8th day. He rose on the 8th day. So they walked 7 miles. They encountered him on the 8th. Jesus Christ rose on the 8th day. He sees parallels to that. It's really interesting the way the ancient fathers read this. I mean, they really saw everything is dripping with meaning. It's remarkable. And they talked together of all these things which had happened. So it was, while they conversed and reasoned, that Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were restrained, so that they did not know him. So these are two disciples. Cleopas is one of them. We actually, I'm sure tradition records the name of the other, but his name is not actually mentioned. So it's two of the disciples, and they're sort of at a crossroads. They don't know what to do. Their leader, who they followed and put their trust in, is dead now. His movement is ended, and I suppose they're trying to figure out what to do, where to go from here. So that's obviously the context. But so Jesus himself drew near and went with them, but their eyes were restrained so that they did not know him. Now, this is something that comes up again and again in the resurrection appearances of Jesus, and this is one of the most mysterious parts of it. But and of course, this happened a little bit before the resurrection of Jesus, like when he walked on water to the disciples in the storm and they thought it was a ghost. They didn't think it was him. But especially after his resurrection, whenever he first encounters people, they don't recognize him. They don't take him for who he is consistently. I can't. Maybe when he appears to the 11, when they're in the upper room, maybe those times they recognize him right away. But really, all the other resurrection appearances, they don't. And the commentary on that has always been that Jesus has, according to what St. Paul says later in the scripture, a glorified body. So it is, in a certain sense, this flesh and blood that we have right now. It is that, but it's been transformed radically. It is different than ordinary earthly flesh and blood like we have now. The process of raising him didn't just bring him back is sort of the same body he had before, but the process of dying and rising actually affected some kind of change. So their eyes were restrained, so they did not know him. Now, this has a meaning according to the fathers. And by the way, I'm doing all this from church father commentaries, the great ancient sages of our church, if you want to use that word, who knew through experience the truths of God, but were also deeply intelligent. I'm using what's called the Catena Aurea. This is really interesting. It was compiled by a Roman Catholic saint named Thomas Aquinas, but it's good for our purposes. He really just took all the Gospels, found all of the church father commentaries on every single verse he could find, and he put it together in 4 volumes. I really recommend it. But it's also, if you don't want a hard copy or can't afford it or whatever, there is a website called Catena Bible. Catena Aurea is Latin for the golden chain. Really, really neat stuff. And so I recommend it very much. So I'm just going through, the commentaries that the fathers have left us on this. So the eyes of the disciples were restrained so that they did not know him. St. Augustine actually says that they were blinded by Satan, but God allows it. St. Augustine is the only one of the fathers who said it was specifically that it was Satan who did that. But it's good to know that sometimes even the bad things that happen to us, like our spiritual blindness, is sent to us by the devil, but God allows it because he has a purpose to bring about with it. What's the purpose that their eyes were restrained right here and now? According to St. Gregory, the theologian, I believe, it just says Gregory, but I'm pretty sure it's Gregory the theologian. Ordinary people are not prepared to encounter Jesus in his glorified state. The world can't handle him, basically. So he does not reveal himself to people while they doubt. And at this point, they are certainly doubting. Even though they've not given up completely themselves into unbelief, it says they're certainly not, all in on Jesus Christ right now, or else morale is low. That's a really good way to put it. They're really discouraged, and even though they might still be clinging to something in their hearts, it's not. The flame is very weak. So God does not reveal himself to them while they're in this state, because they can't handle him. But it's not. He's just saying. It's not that Jesus is saying, "Okay, well, you can't handle me, so I'm just going to leave you alone." But he's coming near them, and he's going to prepare them to, I'm spoiling the ending of this passage. He does end up revealing himself to them, but he's getting them ready for it. He doesn't reveal himself right away, even though he's with them, but he sows the ground. He prepares them, according to St. Theophylact. What's really interesting, actually, is according to St. Theophylact, that's what's interesting about the Catena Aurea, is that St. Theophylact is a post-schism saint. He's only an Eastern Orthodox saint. He's not a Catholic saint, but Thomas Aquinas included him in the Catena Aurea. So it kind of says something. Anyway, so this actually, according to St. Theophylact, I thought this was very brilliant. He says it gives them an opportunity to confess their doubts. They would be if he just appeared to them in glory, who knows? They might just run away. In fact, this harkens back to creation. A big theme, if you read closely, the resurrection of Jesus, is everything harkens back to the beginning. Because Jesus Christ is the new Adam. He is succeeding where Adam failed. He's redoing everything God did in the beginning, but he's doing it right. So he's recreating humanity, except without sin. That's why he rose, in a garden, the way Adam and Eve, and his first interaction is with a woman, is with Mary. It's really, really fascinating to see these parallels. So when Adam actually first sinned, God came to him in the garden, and they heard God's footsteps, and they hid. and they hid. And what the fathers have always commented is they refused to confess. That was their opportunity for Adam to confess, but he did not confess. And now Jesus is coming to the disciples, and he's giving them an opportunity to confess their doubts, to confess their unbelief, to confess the fact that they departed from Jesus. And according to St. Theophylact, it's to reveal their wound and receive a cure. That's very amazing. And that's what the sacrament of confession in Orthodoxy is all about. It's about being cured. It's not about, just saying, oh, I'm such a horrible person, but it's about saying, well, this is everything that's wrong with me. This is God, it's about opening yourself up so God can actually do work on you, and fix you. So, I mean, it's just so brilliant. So God's giving them an opportunity to confess, and in that way, also prepare them. So so Jesus is with them now, but they don't recognize him. And he said to them, "What kind of conversation is this that you have with one another as you walk and are sad?" It's a funny thing to say to someone as you just walk up to them and meet them, but it's the Lord. Then one of those, whose name was Cleopas, answered and said to him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem? And have you not known the things which happen in these days?" So again, here, Jesus, this is the opportunity to confess. Tell me what's going on. What are you doing? Why are you here? Why are you sad? He could have just said, "Yes, I know everything that's going on." And apparently, they're saying this is public knowledge. Jesus Christ caused a huge kerfuffle throughout Jerusalem. And remember Pontius Pilate, when he washed his hands of Jesus, he was worried there was going to be a riot. So he was doing it. So the whole city steamed up. So it's really hard not to have known about Jesus Christ, but that's just a side note. And he said to them, "What things?" So again, giving them opportunity to confess. So they said to him, "The things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who is a prophet, mighty in deed and word, before God and all the people." So notice, this is what we're talking about, saying that they are doubting, or at least not fully believing properly, because they say he's a prophet, but they stop there. Jesus referred to himself as the Son of God, as the Son of Man, who was a mysterious divine figure from the book of Daniel. He really made these huge claims about himself, but the disciples are part of the way there. They're willing to say he was a prophet. He was so they're not denying him completely. They're not rejecting him outright, but they haven't fully embraced his identity or committed themselves to him in that way. And I think that's where oftentimes a lot of us are, or maybe not us here, but people in general, is they recognize there's something really remarkable about Jesus, or something really compelling about the person of Jesus, but they're not yet ready to take the leap. And St. Theophylact, again, really digging deep into every word of the text. He says that even the word order here is significant. So he's a prophet mighty in deed and word. Why? Because deeds have to precede words. You have to show that you're a righteous man, or else your words are worthless. And so by saying Jesus is mighty in deed and word, in that order, he's saying he walked the walk in addition to talking the talk. And before God and man, and before God and all the people, because the first thing you have to do is please God, and then worry about pleasing people. These are the priorities in human life, and you have to do good towards God, and then the first commandment is to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then the second commandment is to love your neighbor and yourself. So even in these little tidbits of text, there are these parallels to other things that are going on in the scriptures. Really neat. And how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and crucified him. And so this is the tragedy of the Son of God, which it was that it was his own people who betrayed him, and it was his own people who gave him over to die. And it was specifically the chief priests, so the ones who were supposed to be bowing down before him in worship, were the ones who turned on him. And that's true in all of our lives, though. I mean, we're the ones who, how often do I turn on Christ? How often do I reject him, if not through my words, then through my deeds, or just the way I live my life? And that's sort of, if Jesus had come at any point in history, in any other context, we would have done the exact same thing that they did, because we're doing it right now. So again, this is something where, yes, it was a specific historical circumstance, but it echoes throughout all places and all times. It's not that they were uniquely evil and we're good. It's everyone is. Yes.
It's from a famous novel called The Grand Inquisitor.
Oh, by in the Brothers Karamazov. Yeah.
That's exactly what you're saying. We know who you are. You got to get rid of
Yeah. Oh gosh, does anyone remember the Grand Inquisitor that well? I had the. It was basically it's. Okay, let's see how well I can remember it. But basically,
they bring him to the Inquisitor, and he says, we know who you are, and I'm sorry, but you're in the way. We've got a great thing going here. We've got things under control. We're in charge. We don't need you here. Your presence here disturbs us, and we've got to get rid of you.
That's right. Jesus Christ reappears in late medieval Spain, and the Inquisition basically captures him and throws him in jail. And there's this interview with the interrogation of the Inquisitor of Jesus, and the Inquisitor basically says, "Look, Catholicism is great. This moral, ethical, world-conquering system. We don't need you anymore." And really the most remarkable part is that at the end Jesus doesn't say anything. He just gives him a kiss. And it's really there's really this is by Fyodor Dostoevsky, in the Brothers Karamazov. It's really profound and amazing. I'm probably not doing justice to it, but it is exactly that. Is if Jesus came back, we'd crucify him again. I'd end up crucifying him and I wouldn't even have realized. You know what I mean? But just given my sins, it's very interesting.
You think of all the situations you get into where if you really defended the truth, Christ, it's true.
Right.
So you keep your mouth shut.
Right. It's very strange. I mean, even in a society that's where I would say it's better. America's not a Christian society; it's a post-Christian society. It's better, but it's crazy that there's so much hostility to Christianity within a society like throughout its history oozed with Christianity. But it's the way of things. But
no, I mean, yes, it was Christian in the sense of Amos's northern Israel was Jewish. We have our festivals, we have our holy days, we have all that. But
Christian in form, but not necessarily in heart.
We take care of the poor and put them down and enslave them. And, have our beds of ivory. We work it all out, so it's okay. You don't really have to change the system.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, because even sometimes it's easy to romanticize about Christian societies of the past, but they were always horribly imperfect. You can't romanticize.
When you see the cathedral, remember the witchcraft trials. Remember the rack. There was beautiful stuff there, but there was also
verse 21. But we were hoping that he was going to redeem Israel. Remember, he was going to redeem Israel. He did redeem Israel, but not in the way that they understand it. They wanted him to be a conquering hero. They wanted him to ride in a white horse, not a donkey. They wanted him to defeat the Romans. I'm going through the books of Maccabees right now, and they wanted him to be another Judas Maccabeus who defeated the Greeks and granted liberation to the Israelite state, and everything was peachy. Not really, but that's what they had envisioned. So it's true. Jesus did redeem Israel. Jesus did establish a kingdom. Jesus is the Messiah, but not the way they expected, not what they wanted. And I think that's what a lot of modern Jews today say is if they're confronted by the question of is Jesus the Messiah, they say, well, the Messiah is supposed to be a king, and he's not a king. So that case closed. And so on a superficial level, you can understand why they say that, because anyway.
But that is completely superficial. Almost like superfluous to the point.
Yeah. Well, So okay, if you want to talk about how do we Christians understand it, it's really there are two sorts of prophecies that go, and Saint Justin Martyr really does this well in the Dialogue of Trifle. There are two types of prophecies about the Messiah that are somewhat contradictory to each other. So there's some that really talk about the Messiah being humiliated and pierced for our transgressions, and by his stripes we're healed. So they really, and there are other ones that really talk about him as a royal conqueror. The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my until I make your hands enemies a footstool to your feet. So there are these two types of properties attributed to the Messiah by prophecy. Yes.
Is the conquering side of the prophecy is that coming of Christ is revelation. There you go.
Exactly. So how Christians have always understood it is the prophecies that talk about the Messiah, being a conquering king and establishing a kingdom. On the one hand, they refer to his resurrection, because he conquered Hades and he defeated the devil. But on the other hand, they're going to have their fulfillment in the second coming. And St. Justin Martyr, in the dialogue with Trypho, who's a Jewish rabbi, actually kind of nails him on this. He said, okay, you Jews really emphasize the kingly royal ones, but you say nothing about, by his stripes we're healed, and they pierced his hands and his feet. And so the Christian vision, I think, reconciles both dimensions of who the Messiah is supposed to be. Yeah.
Well, when Christ rode into Jerusalem, we say, modern people, we say a donkey.
Yeah.
If you know the difference between a donkey and an ass.
I don't. Yeah.
Okay. A donkey is small, an ass is large, and this was the foal of an ass, which is a mule, which is a cross between a horse and a mule and an ass. And in ancient Israel, only royalty was allowed to ride a mule. They weren't allowed to ride horses.
Really?
Because it was too much. It was too godlike to ride a horse. They were only allowed to ride a mule. When Absalom, the son of David, was fleeing from David, he was on a mule when he got his hair caught and hung in the tree and died. It was a mule that he would ride. And so Christ came into Jerusalem on a mule, which was riding in like a king, which is what made the Sanhedrin go nuts, I'm sure.
Okay, so actually take back what I said. So he did. So he was on a royal mount then.
Yes.
Okay, I did. I was wrong. I guess
for the Jewish people,
Yeah,
it was. To
it was
us,
very-
it
yeah.
wasn't, because we don't think of a mule as being a fancy mount. But
I'm really
to
grateful to
them,
have Beth on here. She's our
minor in
equid.
ancient history, sorry.
Well, you're our equid expert. I mean, you're really
Well, I'm the horse person, and
yeah.
I'm the ancient history person.
great. Oh, that's fascinating. Well, I learned.
I don't know if it matters, but isn't that the way they make this animal together, they end up being sterile?
Yes, yes.
Because you can't put a horse.
It's technically two different species.
Right, yeah, you can't take two species and
Yeah.
they can produce anything.
Yeah,
So
so
if
they're-
you get one, it's going to be.
It's sterile, yes.
Yeah. I don't know if that means anything in the context of the story, but
It's interesting. Okay, verse 22. In verse 21 still. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, today is the third day since these things happened. Yes, and certain women of our company who arrived at the tomb early astonished us. When they did not find his body, they came saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. So this is really interesting, and this is I'm about to say something from one of St. John Chrysostom's commentaries, but this is how remember, we're talking about eternal truths that apply more than just to the situation, but this is how the community of faith works. The ones who are ready, St. John Chrysostom says, the ones who are ready for it received the news first, so that they could share it with the others and build them up to a point to where they were ready to experience it through themselves. And that really is how faith works within the Orthodox Church. Is none of us start with it's not like we're born as children and we see the uncreated light right away, or maybe we do. I don't know. Maybe babies are looking at angels all the time, but at least if we are, we forget about it. But who did we learn about God from? I mean, if we were raised in a household of faith, we learned it from our parents, who learned it from the priest or their grandma or whoever had a more profound experience and a more profound knowledge, and they passed it on to us and built us up until such time as when we're ready to receive it and experience it for ourselves. So St. John Chrysostom sees this as just a sort of pattern for all the life of faith. And so he sees it very intentional. It was very intentional that these women told the disciples this before they set out on their journey into Emmaus, so that by the time they get on that journey, they're ready to receive Christ. It's very interesting. And certain of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. So that was Peter and John, probably, who went after the women and found it empty, according to John's Gospels. Now this is Jesus speaking to the two disciples, verse 25. Then he said to them, "O foolish ones and slow of heart to believe." Oh, there's a stink bug rocking across my Bible. I hope that doesn't mean anything. Go away. It was on me? You said nothing? I'm just kidding. Okay. Well, we'll hope that doesn't mean anything. No, that's okay. So Jesus speaking, verse 25. Then he said to them, "O foolish ones and slow of heart to believe in all the prophets have spoken." So first of all, this is a stranger who just walks up to them and says, "Hey, why are you walking and being sad?" And now he's saying, "Foolish ones and slow of heart to believe all that his prophets have spoken." It is interesting to see. You know, you especially see this in St. John's Gospel. This is just my commentary, but it's something I really notice, is that, like, when Jesus talks to people, it's never really in according to the conventions of ordinary human politeness. He's very direct, and oftentimes, especially you see in the Gospel of John, people ask him a question, and he'll respond by saying something that seems almost irrelevant. But maybe that's a pattern for how God, interacts with human beings. We have expectations of how he should act or how he should talk to us, and then he talks to us in a totally different way, or he does things totally outside of our expectations. It's just a thought I had, but once you think of it that way, I think you see it again and again. Ought not the Christ to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. So now Jesus is, even though he claims to have known nothing about Jesus of Nazareth being crucified in Jerusalem, now he's starting to tell him why it makes perfect sense, And remember, keep in mind that if you've ever read the Old Testament prophecies that refer to Jesus, they do refer to him, and it is striking, but it's not super obvious. You know what I'm saying? There's nowhere in the Old Testament does it say there's going to be this guy named Jesus. He's going to come in the year 0 AD. He's going to have XYZ characters. It's always the references. They are striking when you see how they line up, but they are also somewhat opaque, and so you do need them explained to you, and you do need them unpacked somewhat. But St. John Chrysostom mentions that this is an important part about what Jesus did. Jesus's resurrection wasn't just some really cool thing that God did. It was but it was actually his master plan. It's what everything was all about. It's what everything was oriented around. It was not just one thing God did one time, but everything, the way God ordered his interactions in history, was to lead up to the resurrection. He chose Noah from all the sinful world so that Noah could start another righteous generation that leads down to Abraham. He chose Abraham, and from Abraham's children, he chooses Isaac, and then he chooses Jacob, and so he's culling the vine of human beings so that they can get to this point of Jesus Christ, the descendant of Abraham, who would die and rise again. So
what you said in that Vespers homily, it wasn't just the culling or the creation of the bloodline up to that point, but then in the culture that could express complex thought in writing, and then in being the Greeks, and then the empire being the Romans,
yeah,
was large enough for it to spread through that complex thought to be able to spread throughout.
Yeah, exactly. So that actually, I think it was the church fathers in general, because they used a lot of Greek learning. But it was basically when the first Christian, yes, God used Greek and Hellenistic culture in the conquest of Alexander and the conquests of Rome, so that when Christ appears on earth, there's sort of a way of thinking that can accommodate it. There's a language that everyone speaks that it can spread through, and there's an empire through which this message can be, like a cultural social structure through which this message can be disseminated. So yeah, exactly. The coming of Christ and his death and resurrection is part of a much bigger sort of plan of reality that's really kind of mind-blowing to even just approach. Because right, and then it's a side point, but even other ancient commentators, even non-Christians, there was Eunomius or someone, a non-Christian, who noted the parallels between sort of Plato's thought and what was revealed by Moses. And he says, what is his famous quotes, "What is Plato but Moses Atticizing?" Atticizing means to speak Greek. So the kind of, when Moses went up into the cloud on Mount Sinai and saw the heavenly archetype of the temple, ancient Greek thinkers thought there was a lot of parallel between that and Plato's idea of the world forms. So these cultures were kind of ready for each other, if that makes any sense. They were, and that was, again, we see that as part of God's providence. Super, super interesting. So God is leading them to faith, so that they can be mentally and spiritually ready to encounter Him. So remember, we said that first God blinds them, or at least allows Satan to blind them, so they cannot see Him in His resurrected state. But He's not just leaving him like that. He's explaining the scriptures so that they can be in a place that they can receive it. Faith, in our modern times, we kind of bristle maybe at the idea that faith needs to precede experience, but it's true. You can't experience something, or you can't properly assimilate something until you are mentally ready for it. The example I always give is, I don't know if I've said it before in one of these classes, but I had a really crazy experience when I was 17. And I was in Moscow, Russia, and on Red Square, which was like the famous center of the center of Moscow. I saw a police officer get shot, and then tussled with the guy who shot him. And it was so far removed from my ability to process it that I wasn't even scared. I assumed it was a movie or a show, or I don't know what. It was so different from anything I would expect from the world that I just stood and stared at that. And it wasn't until like my teacher, who was on the cultural exchange with, dragged me away, and she was saying like he was shot, and I said like, no, it can't be real. Like, it was just so like that can't, like, it just doesn't happen in real life. People don't get shot. In my world, people don't get shot. That's the thing. I could not even, and then it was on the news later, and I learned about it and whatever. So once it was explained to me, then I was able to assimilate it. But I was physically not able to understand what was happening because I was so not mentally and spiritually ready. I think there's an analogy there with the experience of God. You have to kind of be ready to know who God is for Him to reveal Himself to you. Otherwise, it'll just be wasted. I mean, we see that all the time in the Gospels. Jesus does all these miracles, and people are like, you have a demon, or you're a sorcerer, or you're they see something crazy is going on. Like, I saw something crazy was going on in Red Square, but so God is leading them to faith so that they can be mentally, spiritually ready to encounter Him. And notice that God is with them and guiding them, but they don't know it. They don't know it. So what a great analogy for our own lives. God might be God is leading us and guiding us in all these various ways. But we are not aware of how, and we might even be completely blind to it or not believe it. Yes.
One of the things that verifies what you're saying, any one of us probably has an experience of, think of, when we try to explain something to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how hard we tried to explain, we just didn't get it.
Right.
I mean, you ought to understand it, but you don't understand it. And that's, they can't process what
Raise
you
teenagers.
Raise teenagers. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Teach a
absolutely.
teenager about adult responsibility.
So-
I was harkening back to myself.
So we have to. People wonder, why doesn't God just show up and do a bunch of things? There are a lot of problems with that, but part of it is we just wouldn't get it. He did do that in the person of Jesus Christ, and 99% of people didn't get it. And Benjamin Raines, imagine with our current technology what we'd say if he came now. Right? I mean, how?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, but maybe that's part of how history is unfolding. Is it's going to get to a point where no one can believe, because no one can believe in anything. Because all of reality is just smoke and mirrors. Yeah.
Service to us, for him to appear to us, because then it would be even more dangerous for us to not believe at that point.
That's all. Yeah, that's also part of it. That Jesus says pretty clearly in the Gospel of Matthew. I forget which chapter, but he says, "Woe to you, Chorazin and Bethsaida, because if the miracles that were done in you were done in Sodom, the people of Sodom would have all turned and repented." So he says, I did so much for you. I revealed so much to you, and you still didn't accept it. You're going to be in worse hell than Sodom. That's a very scary statement. So it's a mercy if God doesn't reveal himself to us, because we're called to a higher account. You know, there is probably a certain degree to which people will be able to claim ignorance when Jesus comes again, if they really truly knew nothing. But the more you know, the more you're accountable for. The more God reveals, the more is expected of you. And a lot of us have this illusion that, oh yeah, if God just gave me some amazing miracle, I'd rise to the occasion and I'd become the perfect disciple. No, you wouldn't. It's happened many times, and with tragic consequences. And foremost, you know, it's me. Anyway, 28, they drew near to the village where they were going, and he indicated that he would have gone farther. So this is interesting. Why? That's such a random little detail. Jesus indicated that he would have gone farther, but they constrained him, saying, "Abide with us, for it is toward evening and the day is far spent." And he went to stay with them. And according to Saints Gregory and St. Augustine, this was Jesus giving them an opportunity to do a work of mercy. Remember, an important part of Christian morality is there. You know, 6 works of mercy mentioned by Jesus is I don't know if I can just rattle them off the top of my head, but you know, feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, and welcome the stranger. He's giving them an opportunity to welcome a stranger, and they do it. So that's why he doesn't ask to stay with them. He wants to be invited by them. He's giving them an opportunity to do good purely out of the mercy of their hearts, and they take the challenge and they accept it. And this, the saints, the fathers say, is that it wasn't just they needed to know the right scriptures to be ready to receive God, but they actually needed to live a proper ethical life. They needed to do the works of mercy. It's not just about head knowledge that gets you to God, but you actually need to live a Christian life. So amazing what is in these little passages. So it's him giving them an opportunity to welcome a stranger, and they take it in. Now it came to pass, as he sat at table with them, that he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. This is a divine liturgy. This is when Jesus takes, bless, take, bless, break. This is the formula used in the Eucharist, in Holy Communion, in the divine liturgy. This is very deliberate. Notice also, if you go back and read the other Gospels, it always uses that exact same formula to describe his feeding of the 5,000, feeding of the 4,000. He takes, he blesses, he breaks. He takes, he blesses, he breaks. That's a description of the divine liturgy. That's a description of Holy Communion. Then their eyes were opened, and they knew him, and he vanished from their sight. So notice the whole structure of what just happened with them is a divine liturgy. Divine liturgy, the first half is the liturgy of the word, where the priest preaches the gospel and we listen to the epistle, and then the priest preaches, and the second half is the liturgy of the faithful, where we receive him in the bread and wine. So this whole process of the walk to Emmaus is a divine liturgy. First the word, then the sacrament. Then their eyes were opened, and they knew him, and he vanished from their sight. So they were blocked from seeing by Satan with God's permission, but the holy bread destroyed Satan's hold on them. That's St. Augustine. They did not see him while they read the scriptures, but in the sacrament. The word is preparation for the meal, according to St. Gregory. This is how liturgy works. You have to have the one and then the other. It's never, it's always Jesus preaches and teaches before he feeds the people. You have to be mentally, spiritually prepared in that way by the word of God, and then you're ready to receive him. And notice also that he was with them the entire time, but they didn't notice it until the very end. And I think this is important for a lot of the spiritual experiences we'll have in our own life, where we're at various times, and hopefully some of you have had this experience where you went through some difficulty or any period of your life, even if it wasn't particularly difficult, and only in the rearview mirror you can say, wow, God was doing something in particular with me. Wow, that was for a purpose. Wow, something was happening. You didn't know it at the time. You could not have reconstructed that, but then afterwards, with the divine illumination and with the insight, and I think that's what we're going to see, God willing, when we die, is we're gonna have that encounter with God, and then everything's going to make sense. You know, at least if we lived our lives well, we're going to look back and say, oh, that's why that happened, and that happened, and that happened. It was all preparation. It was all part of the way God was shaping me. So that is really great. And notice what that means again is that God can be with us and doing very concrete things with us, and we have no idea about it. It's completely opaque to us. But that doesn't mean it's not taking place. We need that insight. But that's what ancient Christians believed. That's what we, the Orthodox, continue to believe, is that Holy Communion is a life-giving fire. It is something totally supernatural. It is not a mere symbol. It is something supremely special and unlike anything else that exists in ordinary human life. That is what the scriptures are teaching us right here, and that's what the experience of the saints has shown again and again. We receive the sacraments because we're moving closer to God through them, because we're hoping to bring about an encounter with God. I mean, that's what the Orthodox spiritual life proceeds in 3 stages: purification, illumination, deification. We are hoping to encounter God. We are hoping to see God. We want him to reveal himself to us. That's what life is all about. I've never seen God, directly myself, but apparently it's really cool. Apparently it's really fulfilling. Saint Sophrony of blessed memory, he was a Russian saint who ended up founding a monastery in England. He passed away in 1994, a remarkable saint, but he talks about this 2-week period of his life where he was seeing the uncreated light of God in his cell, his monastic room. And he would just do his chores or whatever and just get them done and just go back to behold the vision of God, because it was so remarkable. He didn't even eat or drink. He just wanted to experience that continually. And then he had a prideful thought and he lost it. And he said God never revealed himself with the same strength and splendor again his entire life. But apparently something about the vision of God is so powerful. It's the answer to all our questions. It's the fulfillment of all our desires. There's something so incredible about that experience that it makes everything else worth it. So that's what we're aiming for. So their eyes were open and they knew him. He vanished from their sight. I don't want us to read that in such a glib way that we miss the significance. They saw him. They saw him for one brief shining moment. They saw everything as it was, and really God revealed in his splendor. And then he vanished. Because they couldn't, in this body of flesh and blood, even whatever spiritual experiences we have are temporary, and then they're going to be overtaken by difficulties, temptations. This is the world we live in, marred by sin. Our own bodies, our own self is marred by sin. Everything we can get really remarkable glimpses in this life, but they will only be glimpses. We're aiming for that final experience. And they said to one another, "Did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us on the road and while he opened the scriptures to us?" So again, they were experiencing God. They were experiencing God while he was speaking to them, not fully, not directly, but their heart was burning within them. And I do think, I'll add some caveats, but I do think that is part of the marker of real spiritual experience. Is there something, I don't know, when you feel that God is with you, that when it's a really profound experience, that just is that it's that's what's going on. It's not perfect. We shouldn't always, trust our emotions, and there are such things as false experiences of God or totally delusory experience of God. So we shouldn't put all stock in our feelings, but it is part of how we recognize God, in communion with the wisdom of the church and our spiritual father. We should examine our experiences, but sometimes we have real experiences, like the burning of our heart. Benjamin, yes. Hello? Oh, on the top of experience. He's typing. I think, when I like to say, it's not every time, but, sometimes when you're just praying or you get an opportunity to do something good, or the divine liturgy, or you experience the divine liturgy, you just have these incredible just feelings sometimes, just out of nowhere. It's the enlightenment and meditation spirituality sells people the lie that we can experience that all the time. Is that true? I didn't know that. Yeah. It's there's a degree to which it's true. So I'm rereading the life of Saint Iacovos of Evia, and there is kind of a certain state where once you've passed a certain spiritual point, that even while you're suffering, you can be experiencing peace and joy. So So there is a level where it doesn't fully go away, but you will still have suffering and you will still have temptations. But if you're far enough along, there's still always a residue of the presence of God. Saint Theophan the Recluse says, God will be present to you as a toothache. So like the way you can't forget, that you're having this kind of pain, God is going to be as present to you no matter what. But like you said, it's important to note, even granted that God is always with you in some sense, and you'll always be perceptive, there will still be terrible temptations. I mean, if you read, there seems to be this like spiritual rule that, and I think it is actually a spiritual rule, but if you read about the great saints of recent times, I'm thinking of Saint Porphyrios, Kalavitsakis, Saint Iacobos of Evia, the last like 10 years of their life, they go through tremendous bodily suffering. I remember, reading about Saint Porphyrios. He's just like nearly blind, and like pretty much blind, and he's like just virtually immobile for a really long period of time, and just suffering and just continually experiencing pain. But at the same time, so he's having a really rough go of it. There's this, I think Saint Joseph Esga says that like God allows the really advanced saints to Satan, because he just can't get to them. He just can't get to their soul. He's able to just get to their body in terrible ways, and they have all kinds of sicknesses and trials in that way. So they really are suffering, but they're also still paradoxically having a profound experience of grace. And so, yeah, Benjamin, to bring it all full circle, Benjamin's saying, if anyone's telling you that you can have that grace without that suffering, in this life, that's not true. It is a lie. That is a fiction. Even though you can reach really great spiritual heights, they're always going to be intermingled with a certain degree of just difficulty, tremendous difficulty.
Can you read what Benjamin wrote again? It was
the enlightenment in meditation spirituality sells people the lie that we can experience that all the time. Right. And I know that's something Benjamin has experience with. So it's, I was, so I appreciate the different perspectives people can bring and experiences they have. So anyway, in sum, I love the Road to Emmaus passage. It is so amazing because there's incredible depth to every little thing that goes on, and it really rings true to me. If we want to sum up, there's really three. It's about the encounter with God, where we start and how we get there. And there are three things together that lead to the self-revelation of Christ to us. First, there's sort of the intellectual knowledge of the Scriptures. Christ expounds on the Scriptures to them, and through the Scriptures, they learn who Christ is. But that's still just the groundwork being laid. Number two is the works of mercy. They have to offer hospitality to a stranger. They have to do good. You can't just have the head knowledge without the transformation of your heart. You can't have the head knowledge without loving others. So the Scripture, the works of mercy, and then finally the sacrament. And that's what's missing is in a lot of, if you try to do any of this outside of the Orthodox Church or in some other tradition, you can get a certain distance, you can get a certain level of wisdom and you can get a certain level of goodness, but you need that supernatural grace that comes from the sacraments to really bring it full circle in the revelation of Christ. It is in the breaking of the bread and only through the breaking of the bread, that is to say, partaking of the Holy Communion, that they recognize who Christ is. So this just, I don't know, it's awesome. I really like this. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk about it with you guys, and I'm really grateful for your insights.
So you're really glad that Father Sam got sick?
No.
What you trying to say, Mom?
I don't even know what to say to that. Yeah. Well, anyway, thank you, everybody. I'm gonna hang around to talk to people, and I'll leave the live stream running for a little bit. But we might as well start closing prayer, and I won't keep you far over time. Christ our God, you are the fulfillment of the law and the prophets. You have completed the divine plan of the Father. Fill our hearts with joy and gladness, now and ever, into the ages of ages. Amen. God bless you. Go with God. Have a good day, guys. I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you.
I've been reading. I'm actually reading. I think almost through Luke again, and I was reading. Going back to what we were saying about like people's eyes open and Jesus like preaching in parables and stuff like that. He said, "If I can read something that